Okay, hello, Dr. Stallworth. How are you?
Fine, how are you doing?
Doing great, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. Nice to have you here. So, you've got a lot of stuff on your bio, as I was mentioning before we got on. Looks like, aside from being a medical doctor, you were a personal manager for an R&B group and a restaurateur, and also an author. You've got a book to promote. Let me start with the personal manager. Uh, I remember that song, Boogie Oogie Oogie. It was a, it was a pretty cool song. How did you get that job?
Let's see. Music was always a hobby of mine, and in fact, I started playing trumpet in the fourth grade and played in a band. I played at my eighth grade graduation. I played. I was um, um, in high school. I was in a band, the marching band, and I hadn't played much after that. But it created an interest in music, and I tended to gravitate towards students who were good in music. And same thing happened when I went to college. So when I arrived in California, Los Angeles, in 1971, for a residency at UCLA in anesthesiology, two of my friends and fraternity brothers from Howard University were had just got their first record recorded, and it was called "I Want You Back" by the Jackson Five. And then for the next 4 or 5 years, they did all of the Jackson Five music. And because they were my good friends and, kind of like best friends at Howard, I hung out with them and I was in the studio a lot. They used to call it at Mo West Studios, which was over in Santa Monica. That was the Motown studio where everybody at Motown recorded. and and through that, I just had an interest in music. And then I happened to take a course also when I'd been in school 23 years and I kind of missed the classroom. So I started taking these courses at UCLA, nighttime courses. And one of the courses I took shortly before I ran into this group was a course called How to Make a Record Deal and How to Record a Demo and Make a Record Deal. And then I went to a wedding. A friend of mine's daughter was marrying, ironically, was marrying the guitar player for the Smokey Robinson. And at that wedding, when I got there, there was good music playing. And when I finally got up to the point, because the stage was the same level as the audience, and I got the level, I saw the group, and I was just mesmerized by this group. And it was two females, one playing guitar, one playing bass guitar, and they were playing top 40 tunes. So every song was a great hit. And that's sort of how I met the group, and I knew the Commodores from Alabama. I took a couple of them to see them perform. They were performing at a club called uh, Club Etc. in Hollywood, and um, and also took my two producer friends, and then they asked me to manage them. And I had another friend who was also a doctor, and he had a young lady that asked him the same. But after he saw Taste of Honey, he abandoned his lady, and we both signed this group to a management contract.
Well, you did pretty well because they won a Grammy, didn't they, for Best New Artist?
We were the first black group in the history of the Grammys at that time to win for Best New Artist.
Wow, that's amazing. Why didn't you stay in music? Why did you want to be a doctor?
Well, several things happened. Number one, I didn't enjoy the road. I didn't enjoy going on the road. They went on the road after that record came out. They went on the road with as an opening act for the Commodores. And when you see I mean, I guess when you're performing, it's a different thing. But it's hard for me to just look at the same performance night after night. And the Commodores that year was doing 90 concerts in a year. So, and I think we went to about four of them. And then I had a family tragedy. Um, the mother of my only child at that time, who was 8 years old, and my ex-wife, she had been remarried and redivorced when this happened, but she had an automobile accident that left her quadriplegic, and I had to take care of my daughter alone for the. I had joint custody at that point, but after that accident, she was with me for a number of years while her mother was in rehabilitation.
Oh, I see. Yeah, you don't want to have a young child on the road with a band. That's not a
Right.
good life for them. That's for sure.
Right. So that's how I ended back to practice in medicine.
You also were a restaurateur. Do you still have the restaurant, or is it closed down now?
No, the restaurant, just when we opened in 1999. My partners in that was Danny Glover and an executive from Pepsi and a casting director friend of mine. And it was called Hollywood Fries over in Westwood. And then just when we were scheduled to open our second location, which was going to be at Hollywood and Vine, that new development there, that new shopping mall has just been built. Then 9/11 happened. And the mall was based on the fact that you had 10 million tourists at the Chinese theater there.
Oh,
And as you know, you might remember, they stopped all flights for about a year between here and China. So that mall went down. And on the block that we were on in Westwood, on one corner was an Arab type restaurant, and across the street was an Arab type restaurant. So nobody came on our street, and they weren't from that country that was accused of doing this, but to the public they were all the same. So the traffic, the walk-in traffic, because we were what do you call it, a spontaneous kind of purchase store. It wasn't like a destination kind of restaurant. It was a order and serve, quick serve restaurant, and so. That cut down the business. And of course, we never opened a second location because that mall at Hollywood and Vine, which is still there, but they built it. It cost $600 million to build, and 2 or 3 years after 9/11, they sold it for 300 million. So it was a loss, and that kind of affected us. So that's sort of why we stopped the restaurant business. And I have to add, it was the roughest business I have ever been in. I would never do a restaurant again. I admire anyone that's had a successful restaurant or a restaurant chain or even a Starbucks chain or whatever. It's a very tough business, especially for a neophyte like me.
and now you've got a book out, and your book is called "Are You N Asterix 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 or a Doctor?" Why did you decide to give it that title?
Well, I started writing this with a writing group of about 6 people that asked me to join, and they were writing a memoir. I had no plans to write a memoir. And the way a memoir was explained to me that was different from a autobiography is that autobiography is sequential, and it's usually in order, from time you're born to the end and so forth. And a memoir is a slice of life. I guess it's basically your memory. So this incident that I wrote about is in a chapter by the same title. Happened in 1970. Uh, when I went to I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. I never left the state of Alabama until I was 16 to go to college, and I went to so all black schools, and at that time we used the word colored, all colored schools in elementary school, all colored high school, elementary school, and then went to a predominantly black college, Howard University, predominantly black medical school. We had 8 white students out of 80. And then I went to a Case Western Reserve Hospital in Ohio, and we had about 35 interns and residents, and I was the only black one. And that question was asked to me, a patient asked me that question. And it was a total shock. So it was a shock, and I won't tell you my answer right now, but you may have read it if you read the book. But um, it was the first time I'd heard that word spoken by a white person since I'd left Alabama. Where when I lived there, the people who were running for governor or a mayor used that word commonly. They used it in a different way, spelled it more like Negra. the way they pronounced it, but they would intend it. It was their accent that made it sound like Negra rather than the ER. And so that was a total shock, and I just never forgot that. So since you're writing from memory, that was the first story I remembered, and in detail. I remembered every scene of that story. It was no problem bringing that to mind. So when I started thinking of the title of the book, most memoirs are that get a lot of play are by famous people, actors, politicians, someone controversial, Prince Harry, whoever. Everybody's got a memoir. Being a relatively nobody, I figured I needed a more provocative title. And since that story was the first one I remembered, I just chose to use that title. The book is more personal than the title suggests, because I've had some people who read the title, they expect it to be a whole series of those kind of incidents. That's the only time that ever happened during my 45-year practice of medicine. It never happened again. So it was just a one-time incident, and the book is more the memoir is more personal. Of course, during the time that I grew up in Alabama from birth till I left in 1963, that was kind of always, I lived under Jim Crow. And so everything that you did, whether you were going to school or going to church or wherever, you were always affected by the Jim Crow laws and the attitudes of the white people in power at that point. And by that power, I mean the mayor, the governor, who were basically Ku Klux Klan infiltrated. And I'll mention, I don't want to give you too long of an answer, but I just want to give an example. Prior to those girls being bombed in 1963, who were killed, all of them I knew very well, by the way. But prior to that, we were having an average of 53 bombings a year for the last 15 years of houses and churches, and it never made the newspaper. No one was ever killed. One dog was killed. One attorney, Arthur Shores, who at the time was the only black attorney licensed in the state of Alabama. His house was bombed several times, and because the Ku Klux Klan had infiltrated the police, no, there was never any investigation. But the bombing of those girls got national and worldwide attention, and that's when things changed.
How long has the book been out?
The book was officially released February 14th.
Okay. What kind of response are you getting from it?
I'm getting a very good response. As I said, you're competing with Prince Harry and all the celebrity type people in terms of memoir, but it's getting pretty good response, and I'm getting it's been a gradual response. But for example, I've gotten phone calls from many of the people that I've grown up with, either emails or texts or phone calls from people that I grew up with in Alabama, who have their stories after they read my stories. In fact, one lady, she called me and said, she sent me an email, and she said when she read my book, she had to keep putting it down because she kept crying. Where she grew up on Sugar Hill, which was known, because it had so many bombings, it was really the name was changed to Dynamite Hill. And she remembers bombings and waking up, and her home was on a hill. So that morning that church was bombed, she said that she could see the smoke coming from the church from her bedroom window. And her family, her grandmother went to that church, was a member of that church, and attended that church. So they spent that time trying to trace down their grandmother, and it turns out that she didn't go to church that day, luckily. So that's the kind of conditions that were going on at that point.
All right. Well, Doctor, we do have to wind this down. Thank you so much for coming on. And you said the book is out now. Do you have a website you want to give out?
Yeah, the website is Otto. It's my name, Otto E. Stallworth Jr., which is Jr. MD.com. Otto E. Stallworth Jr. MD.com. And there you can get information about me and information about the book. You can even order the book from that site. It's for sale at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Apple Books, it's every place. And the audiobook is coming out in about 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay, great. Well, I
So,
wish we had more time, but thank you so much for coming on and sharing your stories, and best of luck with the book and everything you're doing.
okay, thank you.